You don't want to miss this episode. We're going to talk about the April update, what's going on in the economy, what's going on with real estate, Bitcoin. Let's dig into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Control and Compound. I'm Darren Mitchell, and joining me as always, Christina White. Christina, how you doing?
Hey, Darren, I'm doing great. I can't believe we're into April, spring has sprung, and another update. Excited to chat about it.
Yeah, a little bit of green grass out there. I think, couple warm days, couple cold days, but
More gray. I like
more
that gray
gray.
rate.
Spring in Atlantic Canada might not be our,
It's not our strong suit.
not our
You want to
strong
come back in summer.
Absolutely. Okay, so Christina, let's dig into it. Let's start with the Bank of Canada. What's going on with the Bank of Canada? Interest rates down to 1 or 2% now, or
Not quite. So we had our last update on March 6th. So since we did our last March update, we had an update from Bank of Canada as well, where they announced that they would be holding steady. So they were keeping fifth consecutive time, they're keeping it at 5%. So we did not see a budge there. So now comes the predictions, right? We have an update coming on April 10th. So everyone's chatting again about what might come. The U.S. did make their announcement back on March 20th. And they are holding their interest rate as well. So they did not do any cuts. So that sometimes can give us an indication of what might happen here. They did over there tell people that they were going to make 3 cuts this next year. So over 2024, they're being a little bit more upfront about what's happening. We don't really have that happening here in Canada. Still, I think Backlund said, I think it's very safe to say we're not going to be lowering rates at the pace we raise them. So not going to be coming down very quickly, if at all. A lot of people are predicting more June. We might see a couple basis points, but it's not going to happen quickly, like they said, right? So, and obviously the driving factor behind all of this is inflation and what we're recording for inflation. So back in January, our inflation rate was 2.9, and in February it went down to 2.8, which they weren't expecting. They were actually expecting it to go up a bit. But if we look at it, really it was like internet and cell phone bills that brought it down. Like I guess we had some lowering there. But what's going to happen, we're thinking, and as we kind of know and expect to happen, is that housing cost is going to go up, right? With spring, we see more sales happening, more people getting into mortgages. We're seeing, mortgage renewals still happening. So that shelter cost is probably going to go up. I don't know what's going to happen for sure, but I don't know if we're going to be able to stay in that 2% range. I have a feeling it's probably going to go up because, again, gasoline prices, right? So they're talking about grocery prices being down a bit, I think 2.4% compared to this time last year. But what about the gas and what's going to happen at the grocery store when April 1st comes, which is, well, I'll let you take that away. What's going to happen April 1st?
Yeah, well, just on inflation first, like CPI is a measure of a basket of goods, but the government gets to pick the basket. Right. So if you're living in your parents' basement and your internet and cell phone is a major expense and that went down, well, great. Maybe your inflation's that. But if you're in the market that you want to buy a home, your inflation's been 30-40% over the last couple of years. If you want to buy a basket of high quality stocks like the S&P 500 index, well, to buy that today is about 30% more expensive than to buy that basket of goods last year. So again, the inflation rate is what the government tells you this basket of goods that they get to pick is. So not necessarily totally accurate in your particular circumstance. Well, April 1st, it's not a joke. It's not just April Fool's joke. The carbon tax is going up 23%.
Yep.
So the carbon tax is going up 23%. Effective April 1st. So that's going to be about 3 cents a liter. And
that's a lot. You're going to feel that. Like you're going to feel at the pumps 3 cents a liter for a regular Canadian that's kind of already struggling to pay the grocery bills and what. We're going to see those grocery prices go up too, right? It's all going to have that trickling effect.
And it's not just putting gas in your car. It's the farmer's going to have to pay extra carbon tax. The truck that takes it from the farm to the manufacturing place is going to have to pay carbon tax. That manufacturing place uses energy; they're going to pay carbon tax. That truck that delivers it to the grocery store, they're going to pay carbon tax. That grocery store that has lights and power to run their facilities, they're going to pay carbon tax. So I don't anticipate all of those people just eating that money and not passing on that increase to consumers. So it's going to be tough long term as carbon tax goes up to manage that inflation rate.
Well, yeah, they're saying it's going to keep rising annually until 2030. So it's just going to, not ideal, not ideal.
Moving on to economic news, I didn't get to see her. I was away, but Carolyn Rogers, she's the deputy governor of the Bank of Canada. She was in Halifax for a speech on March 26th. She's one of my new favorite people now. So I assume she's been watching our podcast. I always, every month or two, I talk about productivity in Canada, how it's dropping, and the spread between the U.S. and Canada, and it's really nice to see someone at her position talking about this. She said, "I want to talk about Canada's long-standing poor record on productivity and show you just how big the problem is. You've seen the sign that says, 'In emergency, break glass.' Well, this is one of those times." So that's how concerned she is with Canada's productivity. She went on to say that an economy with low productivity can only grow so quickly before inflation sets in. But an economy with high productivity can have faster growth, more jobs, and higher wages with less risk of inflation. So if we look at Canada's productivity going back to 1984, we were 88% that of the US. So our productivity was less, but 88%. In 2022, it dropped to 71%. So we are 71% as productive as the US. Now, maybe in unrelated news, if we jump to the stock market, in the last year, the US market is up 32% and the Canadian market is up 12%. Okay? So that's a big spread, right? US market year to date up 10%, Canada year to date up 5.9. But if we look at the past year, US stock market up 32%, Canada up 12%. So, productivity has a lot of implications in the economy.
Absolutely. And moving right along to the Canadian dollar, which is just following suit. So when those inflation stats came out recently, the Canadian dollar actually took a tumble to 73.5 cents, 73.5 US dollars. So we had been talking about it staying around, that 74-cent mark for the last little bit. After the last time the Bank of Canada had made an announcement, we saw some movement. Well, when those inflation rate numbers came out, we again saw some movement in the wrong direction. We also saw the Canadian 2-year bond yield, which was nearly unchanged in the prior to the report, immediately fall 8 basis points from 4.2 to 3.4%. So those are some indicators right there of what that, the inflation, the productivity, all of these things, on the Canadian side of the border are, what it's impacting.
Well, now on some better news.
Okay.
So Bitcoin. So again, we always preface saying we are not Bitcoin experts. We're not telling you to invest in Bitcoin. But I was talking to a friend of mine, Hockey Ken, the other day, and he goes, "I don't invest in anything I don't understand." And I was like, "Yeah, that's fair." And I'm like, "But do you think you should spend some time educating yourself on what Bitcoin is? I'm not telling you to invest, but maybe it makes sense to spend some time educating yourself." The last month, Bitcoin's up about $8,000. We saw it come up, then down, then back up. So year to date, Bitcoin's up 60%. And over a 1-year period, Bitcoin's up 158%. So in 1 year, it went from around 27,000. Now it's around 70,000. So again, the question people always ask, is it too late to buy Bitcoin? Well, if you think of Bitcoin as digital property, right? That's all it is, digital property. In 1776, New York City, Manhattan, was the most desired piece of real estate in North America. If you waited till 1800 to buy in Manhattan, was it still a good buy? If you bought in 1850 in Manhattan, were you too late? If you bought in 1980, were you too late to buy in Manhattan? And we can do the same thing with Google, right? Google came out in 1998. Was it too late to buy 14 years later in 2012? If you could go back in 2012 and buy Google shares, would you? Well, Bitcoin's about 14 years old now. Are you too late? We'll see. Okay. So again, educate yourself on Bitcoin. Just learn about it. We're not experts. We're not giving you advice. But it's an asset that's growing in popularity. Everyone's talking about it. I think people that, even if you don't invest in it, just educate yourself on it a little bit and learn more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a hot topic. You need to know what's going on. You got to hear about it. You got to learn about it for sure. So jumping into real estate, I'll just start with some real estate stats, kind of what's going on out there in the market, and then get into some real estate news that I thought was interesting. So there was an uptick in Canadian home prices in February. So the benchmark went up about 1.8% monthly increase. So the typical home was 720,500 in February. So overall, the Canadian home prices are up, like we've been seeing it, right? Prices are up. When we look across the country, obviously different provinces, different prices. But if we look at British Columbia, they lead the pack with the benchmark home price of 966,000, Ontario's 868. And then the province with the lowest price was New Brunswick at 286. So there's still some deals over there in New Brunswick. You want to check them out. When we look at the market, though, definitely still seeing sales and things picking up. And that's because, well, one, we've got the spring market coming. So this is typically when prices are, or when sales are going to pick back up. A lot of people are saying, too, over the last couple of years, well, interest rates have been up, people have been saving, right? So they've been saving and now they want to jump into the market. They don't want to wait until Bank of Canada lowers the rates. They're better off jumping into it now, might get a deal. So we're seeing that. And then, of course, we've got the supply and demand. And I wanted to, so stat that just came out. 9 months after reaching a population of 40 million, Canada has cracked a new threshold. So as of March 27th, we're estimated at 41 million people now. So that's a million people in 9 months. That's crazy,
Wow.
right? And that's temporary. They're saying it's from temporary immigration. So new people coming into Canada, obviously. New people, a million new people coming into Canada. We don't have the housing for a million new people coming into Canada. Like I found a stat from CMHC, and they're saying that Canada needs to build 5.11 million homes between 2022 and 2030 to restore affordability in the housing market.
Sorry, how many homes?
5.11 million homes in order to restore. That's what they're saying. Well, at this rate, though, I'm thinking they're probably going to have to, increase a lot more than that. But they're saying that. And then they went back and they said Canada has never built more than 2 million homes in any 8-year period. So 5.11 versus 2 million, not ideal. So definitely have that supply and demand. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on was in the real estate market. This just came out recently, and I wanted both of us to kind of chat on this one, was Trudeau's announcement in the upcoming budget when it came to playing field fairer for renters and making it easier for them to become homeowners. So some new measures that he wants to put in place that I think we should chat about. So first one we have here is he's launching a new $15 million tenant protection fund. So this is going to provide funding to provincial legal aid organizations to better protect tenants against unfairly using rent payments, rent evictions, or bad landlords. The bad landlords out there. Oh, that one's. The next one he's got is creating a new Canadian Renters Bill of Rights. We've got to protect those tenants, right? You want to crack down on the rent evictions. This is all about the rent evictions, standard lease agreements. And then the last one is making sure renters get credit for on-time rent payments. So the landlords are going to have to track the renters' credit now too. So how do we feel about these?
So I think when I think of this new Canadian Renters Bill of Rights that Trudeau's announced, I think of Ronald Reagan when he gave an inaugural speech and he says, "Government is not the solution, government is the problem." So does anyone seriously think that the Canadian government's going to get involved in tenants' rights and between landlords and tenants, and it's going to make the situation better? Like, we both belong to a lot of real estate investing groups, and we have a lot of real estate investing clients. And so many of these clients, the trend in the past 2 years has been to go to the States to invest, go to the States, because some of the provinces are getting really strict with rent control and tenants. You can't evict them. They're in there for 18 months not paying. So people are going to the States. And now the federal government has come in and put more rules and regulations on. Can you explain to me how the government or the credit agencies are going to know that a tenant pays their rent on time? So Trudeau wants to give them credit for paying their rent on time. Nobody knows if they pay their rent on time unless it's the landlord. So is now the landlord going to have to report to the government every single month for all their tenants that pay rent on time? Like how many more layers of bureaucracy are we going to add to these landlords that are already moving to the States or investing in the States instead of Canada? And if you don't get the landlords or you don't get the property developers investing in new units, how are we ever going to fit the or solve the housing problem? So, you know, the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see how it plays out. But, you know, if I was a betting man and Trudeau comes in with a new bureaucracy to solve the renters problem, my guess is this is just going to make it worse.
Yeah, and there's a easier way to solve this: more housing, right? Like maybe take the 15 million, put it towards those houses that we need to build, and help some of those real estate investors out, because you know they're the ones that are going to create the real estate that we need to make rentals affordable again, right? I don't understand the concept, but. Anyways, right on to industry news. So what do we got in industry news, Darren?
Yeah, we got some exciting stats on industry news. LIMRA, the Life Insurance Marketing Research Association, they're the industry standard for releasing stats and stuff, what's going on in the insurance world. In Canada, insurance premiums last year were up 4% to $1.86 billion in life insurance premiums. That's the highest amount ever. So new record for Canadian life insurance premiums. But if we dig into the numbers, this is what I like. Whole life premiums were up 10%. So whole life premium was up 10% in Canada last year. That set a new record of $1.27 billion, right? So people want what we have, right? $1.27 billion of new premium went into whole life. So when you hear, well, why isn't everybody doing this? I haven't heard about this before. Well, $1.27 billion went into whole life last year in Canada. If we look at that as percentage, $1.27 billion of whole life versus $1.86 billion overall, that means 68% of overall premium went into whole life. So if we look at all the premium in Canada, it's up 10%, and 68% of that went into whole life.
So why isn't everybody doing it?
I don't know.
There's lots of people doing it. There's lots of people doing it. I always say $1 billion went in last year. Well, now it's 1.2 billion. It's up. I like it. So on to control and compound news. So upcoming events that we're going to be at, we've mentioned it before, but we are super excited about it. It's going to be a good one where Darren's going to be speaking at the Multifamily Conference in May. So that's May 24th to 26th in Toronto. Tickets are on sale now. They did announce their speakers. So they've got a really great lineup of speakers. They've got Jordan Belfort. They've got Elena Cardone. So they had Grant there last year when we saw. They've got his wife there this year. And then you've got Robert from the Dragon's Den. So super, super exciting that we're going to be there for that. They've got tickets on sale now. So you definitely want to go check it out. I think it's going to be a great event. They've got a good lineup.
Well played, Christina. I noticed you mentioned Jordan Belfort.
You're going to call me out on
Cardone,
that, eh?
and just Robert. From the
Herjavec. I don't like saying people's names wrong.
I hear you. I don't think I can pronounce it either. Robert, you all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Podcasts. First of all, I'd like to say thank everyone for listening and watching the podcast. Our podcast numbers are ramping up, skyrocketing. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this podcast and you like what you're hearing, make sure that you subscribe so that you get the rest of our podcasts as well, right? So just, throw a little plug in there.
and in case you missed some last month, what we did last month, we did one on the lifetime capital gains exemption, huge for business owners. We did another Nelson Nash series on Becoming Your Own Banker book. We have a Bitcoin one last month, and then we had Daniel Foch on. Daniel Foch, he's got such a big brain, it's crazy, right? His stats and numbers, when he talks about real estate, you get into the real estate numbers. He's just a real impressive guy. So check that podcast out, or check them all out if you haven't mentioned them. And then, Christina, what do we got coming up in the month of April for podcasts?
So we got some really good ones. We have a podcast on the participating fund, so the high cash value life insurance policies, where we set up these policies. A lot of people ask, where are they invested? What are they invested in? So we are doing a full podcast on that to let everybody know where they're invested. We also have Mimi from Honeybee Developments coming on. I'm excited for this one. She has when I saw this, I loved it, a due diligence checklist for real estate investors. So what you should be looking for when you're picking your investment deals, when you're picking your joint ventures, those types of things. So that's one. If you're a real estate investor, you're not going to want to miss that one. We also did a podcast coming out on Rich Dad Poor Dad. So some of the key takeaways. So we got our take on it anyways. So that'll be a good one. And then we're also doing 11 and a half questions that we have put together that we receive on whole life, infinite banking, all of that good stuff. So 11 and a half, that was my idea. Half a question at the end there. So.
Nice. Cool. Yeah. But I mean, back to the thanks for watching and listening. Like we make a lot of these podcasts from listeners' feedback. So if you have something that you're interested in, like these 11 and a half questions we're going to answer, are questions that listeners, contacted us and said, hey, can you ask this? So make some comments. Tell us what you want us to talk about. But that's the April update. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have an awesome day.